This is Radiant Voices Media.
Hi, and welcome to the Jordan Kinda Knows Something show, where I'll be talking about health, fitness, life, and anything else I kinda know something about.
You know, some people are really sensitive in some areas of their body. Some people aren't, and really strong stimulation.
What is going on, everyone, and welcome to another episode. Now, today's episode, we are talking about a topic that is super taboo. It makes people super uncomfortable talking about it, and it's a super interesting topic. Now, it's about sex. We are talking about sex today. We are talking about sex health. We are talking about sex education, sex toys, relationships, all of it. I am talking with a guest who is a sexual educator. She teaches people about sex. She helps people with relationships and sex and things like that. Now, sex is something everybody does. So I personally don't understand why it's so taboo still, why people get so uncomfortable talking about it. It is a topic that I've wanted to talk about, and I've wanted to find someone who is willing to talk about it for so long, because it is so interesting and there's so many areas that we can explore. There's so many tips that we can give. Now, why is it taboo? I don't fucking know. It is something that I definitely asked Grace about, and she gives us a little bit of an answer of her opinion, but I don't know, maybe it's because the media and them kind of over-sexualizing everything and making it kind of this hush-hush, or if you notice, when you have it in shows or things like that, again, it's over-sexualized, or it's made fun of, or it's just kind of the person that is super open about it in the shows are made out to be like a slut or a whore or that kind of stuff. So maybe it's that. Maybe it's because porn being so unrealistic and that having something to do with it. I don't know. It is, again, something that Grace discusses, and we kind of get a little bit more into that. Now, I think also your childhood and how you're kind of taught about it definitely plays a role. So me, when I was in middle school, which in Canada, or where I went to school in Canada, middle school is grade 5 through 8. And I remember in grade 6 or 7, we had one class of sex ed. And when I say one class, I mean one 45-minute class ever. And this class, basically, they split up the boys and the girls. So the boys went to one room, the girls went to another. And for my class, basically, we were told to write all of our questions on a piece of paper. We put them all in a hat, and then the teacher would answer the questions. And that was all of the sex ed that we had. It was super awkward, because you could tell the teacher was super awkward about it as well. And you could tell the questions, some of them were super inappropriate, or some of them were just so that people could get giggles out of it, whereas some of them were actual questions. So yeah, that was basically the education that we had around it. And it's, again, it's just such a weird thing that it's not more talked about, especially in schools and especially with kids and with young people, about kind of the body and about consent and things like that. Now, here's the thing. People are interested in it for sure, because you have fucking amazing bosses like Alex Cooper on the Call Her Daddy podcast, who just is so open and so fucking amazing and talks about it. And her podcast is probably one of the top podcasts around the world, or maybe it is the number one podcast right now. But you have people like Alex who is talking about it and making it more normal. So yeah, I just thought this topic or this interview would be super interesting today. It is something that can be explored in so much more depth, and it can be explored in so many different areas. So who knows, maybe there's going to be another episode later down the future. But during this episode, I am talking with Grace Alice. She is a sex educator, a relationship coach. She has so many tips and tricks that she posts on her Instagram. She has a website coming out soon. She does one-on-one coaching, and we just basically talk about her work around a sex educator. We talk about kind of sex education through school. We talk about why sex is such a taboo topic and various other topics throughout this podcast episode. So definitely stick around, and I hope you enjoy the episode. Alrighty. Hello, Grace, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
No worries. No worries. Now, Grace, if you didn't mind starting by kind of introducing yourself.
Yeah, no problem. So my name is Grace Alice O'Shea, and I'm Irish. I am from a place called Kerry in Ireland, which is quite rural. It's kind of down the bottom of Ireland, but I actually live in Galway City, which is beautiful. And in a nutshell, I suppose I'm a sex educator. So I do work in two separate jobs. They're both in the sexuality field. One of them is a relationships and sex educator, where I work with young people, mainly in schools. But I also now, which has brought me to this podcast, have started work as an independent sex educator. So where I will be working with people aged 18 and over. So yeah, that's kind of me. That's
Cool.
how I got to be on this podcast.
Awesome. Yeah. Now I'm like interested, how did you start this journey, and how did you start this journey with becoming like an independent, let's say sex educator, for example? When did it start essentially?
Good question. I guess, so I started in my my other role, so the role in which I work in schools and with young people. I started that actually as an unpaid placement. So I did a master's in health promotion, and then I did an unpaid placement with this fabulous charity called Sexual Health West, and they actually offered me a job at the end of it. So I was delighted, went into that job. I've been doing that, I think, 4 years now. And I kind of always had in the back of my mind that I did want to someday, I think a lot of people have the dream of working for themselves,
Right.
And just kind of, totally doing their own thing and creating their own thing. But it was only actually where it really solidified was during lockdown. So we kind of went into lockdown per se at the end of March. And it just gave me more time, I think, to think, because you're not meeting up with people. You're not like, I wasn't going to schools, so there wasn't this kind of hectic, chaotic, just keeping up with your day-to-day schedule. So I kind of was like, maybe I could start working on something. So in my head, it was always going to start as an Instagram page.
Right.
I just think it's a really nice, kind of accessible way to dip your toes, without committing to a whole website and all this. So I just started working on a logo, and then kind of I needed to separate the two roles. So I said, okay, I'll use my middle name, Grace Alice, and that'll be a separate kind of entity. So really it was during lockdown that I got the logo together. I started the Instagram page, and now a few months on, my website is being developed. I'm open for one-on-one sessions now. I'm putting together some workshops. So it's really exciting. It's all been in my spare time. So it has been full on, but as I said, being in lockdown just gave me that opportunity to really divide up your day the way you want to divide it up, which was actually a nice bit of freedom, ironically, in lockdown.
Yeah.
It was nice to have the freedom to work what hours essentially I wanted. So I guess that's it in a nutshell, really. That's how I became an independent sex educator.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, I know COVID, it of course is negative in all of that sense, but it's a good way for people to kind of start things like this and create businesses and do things that maybe you've always wanted to do. So that's awesome. But I'm curious on what made you start this career? Now, I'm from Canada and living in Australia, and I think sex is always kind of like such a taboo or kind of a topic that people don't want to talk about. People are afraid to talk about, or when you do talk about, they kind of change the subject or things like that. So what made you or how are you so comfortable with this, and what made you kind of want to help others with it?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because it's certainly, it is still taboo. Many areas of sexuality is still taboo in Ireland anyway, even though we have become much better, and I must stress that. But I guess maybe if I work backwards, like certainly growing up in Kerry, which again is quite rural, there's no city in the county of Kerry. Um, there was a lot of shame around sex. It didn't come from my family, thankfully, but just in general, our sex education was appalling. I mean, we didn't really have it. We had a woman, like really well intentioned, come in and basically divide up the girls and the boys. And I don't even know did the boys actually get a class or what, but we got one, and it was just on periods. Essentially, it was just periods, as if that's rooted in your sexuality and everything. And it was just about tampons and pads and this, right, which is great, like, yeah, useful, absolutely, but nothing on desire or masturbation or sexual acts or gender, like, all those consent, so that's the background I was coming from. So I definitely had a lot of, and people find this really hard to believe, people that only know me recently, but I had a lot of internalized shame around this stuff. Like, I wouldn't have talked very openly until I went off to college, which that can happen that way for a lot of people. I think you go off to college. I didn't actually start kind of having sex till I was in college, and I think when I actually started having sex, I was like, oh, this is great. But I was encountering so many like negative attitudes, just particularly around women. And I am conscious that being a woman, sometimes I can have a bit of a biased view of how I talk about these things. But speaking from my own truth, as a young woman, you just couldn't do anything right. Like, you were either frigid or you were a slut, or there was just so much, I felt, shame and punishment attached to having sex, yet there was this pressure to have it. So it was really mind-boggling. So that was kind of all going on in my personal life. And I remember actually going for my first ever STI test, and I'll always remember this. And I only had two sexual partners at this point. And when the doctor asked me, how many sexual partners have you had? I said 2. And she said, oh, good girl. And I just never forget that, good girl, and being like, I don't intend to still say 2 when I come back next year. Like, this isn't the path I'm on. And it just kind of, I know it's only a small moment, but moments like that stick out to me as being actually quite influential. And when I realized, I actually kind of maybe want to get involved in this somehow. I want to kind of help lift this veil of kind of shame. So I did occupational therapy in college, which I love as a discipline. It's something people don't know much about. We know more about physiotherapy, but occupational therapy really is amazing and helps people so much. And one thing I noticed being in that course was that, you learn to help rehabilitate people. So it could be teaching someone how to, when I say teaching, it could be actually teaching, it could be enabling, it could be, it's very complex, but I'm trying to simplify it. You could be helping someone to learn to walk again, or eat again, or write again, or, but there was so little about sex. And I in a way I wasn't surprised, because again, Ireland, but as like a professional thinking, and a person thinking, okay, if I get a spinal cord injury, if I have a stroke, if I'm in a car accident, like all these things that can bring people to OT, and nothing gets said to me about my sexuality and how I'm going to reclaim that, I think that is such a disservice to people. And I didn't feel we were equipped really to address it at all in practice. I really don't even remember even having a lecture on it. If we had, it was definitely only one lecture and I missed it, that kind of way. There definitely wasn't a module on it or anything. So then I got to the end of doing occupational therapy, and I kind of knew that there was something about it that was like, I really like this, but it's not really what I really want to do. And then I came across a friend was doing a master's in health promotion. And what appealed to me in health promotion is it's so broad that you could go into many different areas. And also like OT can be very one-on-one, which is fantastic. And health promotion is kind of about initiatives and campaigns and policy, and just on a more widespread level, which kind of interested me. So when I went into that, I ended up focusing on body image as my topic for my thesis, which I have always been very interested in as well. And sorry, I'm probably rambling on now.
Oh no, I love it. Yeah.
So that's kind of what brought me to, it was very much a kind of journey, and I hate that word sometimes, but it's a bit cliche, but a journey of personal and professional development that has brought me to this role. I couldn't have been in this role, at 18 or even at 21. Yeah. I had to go through all I was going through in my personal life and what I was learning in college to actually get to this point to be comfortable talking about this stuff.
Right.
And yeah, funny enough, I really took to it like a duck to water. Once I went on the placement in the masters doing the sex ed in schools, everyone always asks me that. They're like, surely you were so awkward and nervous at the beginning. I was like, I wasn't. Maybe I was just so ready to talk about this stuff. Yeah. I was just so, I think your passion kind of nearly eclipses whatever awkwardness there is. Because if you're awkward, the kids are going to get awkward. And if you're doing it professionally, there's no real room for awkwardness. So I think I was just, really passionate about being that person that I didn't have when I was a teenager, that like getting as much information into these little people as possible, that could hopefully help them,
Right. Yeah. And I guess too, like if you need it, if they're not getting that in the past, or they're not getting what they need, the education, then you should be passionate about it. And it's not going to be awkward. I know, like you said, when you only had like a couple classes, right? In school. So I only had one class. I remember, I think it was like grade 6 or 7. We only had one class, one sex ed class. They split up the boys and the girls again. And that was that. It was 1 year, one class. I don't even remember I think actually the teacher brought a hat around, and we all had to put in questions on things that we were curious about, and then put it in the hat, and then he just answered it. So it was like a 20-minute class, and then we went on our day. That was our education. So yeah, it's very again, it's very taboo, and it was almost like the teacher didn't want to talk about it as well, So I guess what I'm interested though is what kind of things do you do? So what are common things that you educate on?
Yeah, there's a big variety, to be honest. And again, this, I suppose, as an independent sex educator, my business is still just starting off. But generally speaking, there's a lot around sexual communication, basically. And I know that's a really broad term, but how to communicate with your partner. That's something that comes up over and over. And I suppose it's linked to consent and boundaries and all that, which are so important. And again, really need to be learning this stuff from a young age, because it's hard in your 20s or any age to be unlearning all these roles and beliefs about sex and trying to learn a whole new script. But it is possible. I get there would be questions as well, just kind of around, I suppose, your standard, contraception, protection, different things like that. A good bit about using sex toys, actually. That seems to be a popular topic. People are kind of wondering, how do I start with all this? Because there's so many gadgets and everything you can get. Also, something that comes up a bit is, I suppose, relationship issues in things like infidelity and cheating, and as well dating. I mean, dating is a huge one. People struggling with dating, and how do I meet someone? And it's the age-old question, and it's just in the age of internet dating, I suppose, and Tinder and whatnot. You are adding so many layers to it, and you're coming across so many people. So that would be one of them. I'm trying to think, is there anything else? Oh, pleasure would be a big one. So
Right.
particularly with women, I've worked with several women who would be in their 20s and have not yet had their first orgasm. And like at first when I kind of came across these stories, I was like, oh, that's really sad. But
Yeah.
like, it's sad because and it's not that anyone has to, that there shouldn't be pressure on people,
Right.
because there is legitimate reasons why women are having this problem.
Right.
But it's just that, that it's kind of common, and it's
Yeah.
they're kind of like, how do I have one? And it's like, okay, you have to go right back and talk about, so it's masturbation and your connection with yourself, and even all the messages you've picked up all through your life about sexuality, like they all inform this stuff. So that is one that comes up a lot.
Right.
And there's a few other bits and pieces, but they would probably be the main ones at the moment that have come up so far.
Okay. I'm interested about the toys. So when you educate people on the toys, I'm sure, like, again, there's so many things out there. Where do people start when they're going to look or when they're trying to choose?
Good question. So there's quite a lot to it, but it's absolutely doable, and it's not something anyone should be scared of. I always advocate for the use of sex toys, and it's not saying, oh, you have to use them to have good sex at all, but it's just not to be afraid of them and not to think they're this, because they're very much portrayed in the media as like really kind of a kinky, for want of a better word, objects. Kind of almost still a bit taboo, like kind of this is what you use to spice up your sex life, and it's like, okay, they can do that, but that's not the be all and end all of it at all. Like, sex toys have so many benefits. They help couples and people or people not in a couple in so many different ways. So I suppose, to answer your question, where do I start? So I suppose I start with kind of talking about the different sensations that sex toys can give. So, some people are really, really sensitive in some areas of their body. Some people aren't, and like really like strong stimulation. So just kind of a general conversation with that. And they might not know yet what they like, and that's fine. It's just to kind of get a feel of it. Also, my thing is to find reputable shops and retailers, and I kind of have a list of them that I'm working on, and I share them as I find them on my Instagram, because there is so much stuff out there that is just, I mean, I wouldn't put it near my body, and I did years ago without knowing any better. The materials things are made of and the chemicals used, etc. Like, it is really, there's really some dodgy stuff out there. So finding, and I can recommend these specifically in Ireland, but I can look more far as well, but places that are run, they generally tend to be smaller businesses that are run by people that know their stuff. So for example, there is Sex Siopa, and Siopa is the Irish word for shop, so sexsiopa.ie in Ireland. And it's run by a woman called Shauna Scott, and she's brilliant. Like, you just know from her Instagram, she really knows about sex toys, and you could definitely reach out to her with a question, and she'd be so approachable. And there's Devine as well in the UK. So really finding a really good retailer. And then I think, it's really about, it's a bit of trial and error, unfortunately. Like, you could buy a sex toy and look, you just really don't like the sensation, or you don't like the size of it, or you don't like, and that can happen. So there is a bit of trial and error. So that's why I always say, like, start simple. Like, you don't need to be going for all the bells and whistles first go. Unless you've loads of money and you don't mind, like, buying an assortment. But starting really simple with, like, kind of the smaller vibrators that have like multiple speed settings. So again, you're kind of playing with the different sensations and stuff like that.
Is there anything people need to watch for? Like materials, you were saying before, there are a lot of materials out there that are bad, for example, or is there any places that you wouldn't recommend? Is there any things that you need to start with? Because I mean, there's even online, I don't know if there's Amazon in Ireland. for example.
There is,
But,
yes.
like,
Well,
you could
yeah,
go
yeah.
to Amazon, let's say, or you could go into a shop, for example. Is there anything that people need to watch for?
I think like with online, I suppose, I think there was a whole kind of expose around Amazon sex toys being
Okay.
returned and resold on. I
Oh,
don't know, did
okay.
you hear
Well,
about that? But
no, but
yeah, that's something.
that's good to know.
I know, and that's not something you want, to be happening. I definitely read about that somewhere, but I would need to double check it.
Yeah.
What I would look for is the term body safe.
Okay.
So body safe materials, body safe ingredients, and you will see that again on online shops like Siopa and Joe Devine. They actually go into, kind of in detail what
Right.
the materials are. Like if you're online and they're not mentioning anything
Yeah.
about it being safe or the materials or ingredients, I would just
Then
proceed with
run.
caution.
Yeah.
Even with lubricants, like there's some massive brands, and we all know the big name brands, and you can go into a pharmacy and buy it.
Yeah.
But some people react really badly to them because they're full of sugars and flavorings and just different kind of chemicals, basically. So really, I would be moving towards sex toy retailers that are very upfront about their products being body safe, and they don't stock stuff that isn't body safe. Any retailers that have a good education section on their website is really good to see. And there was something else as well that I can't remember. It's gone out of my head. I think sex toy shops as well, retailers that are very I don't know is gender neutral the word, but basically very inclusive probably would be the word I'm looking for.
Right.
Because again, then that they have a good understanding of anatomy and how it differs. And it's going to be much easier to approach a company like that or a little business and ask them a question and just be confident that they're going to give you, sound advice as well.
Right. And I think that's another thing to it, right? Some people may be embarrassed to go into a shop or something like that. So if you have these people that are knowledgeable and make you feel safe, then it's probably makes the experience a little bit easier for them to go back.
Definitely. I think it's all about as well the people working for selling this stuff, because I have definitely been in shops, and I won't name obviously anyone, but like there are big retailers, and like you just know that they don't really, like, they're salespeople, which is great, that's their job, but they're not sex educators. And like, I'm not saying you have to be, but I strongly feel you have to have a good understanding of sex, of anatomy, of gender, of all these different concepts, to really know what you're doing in that business. And just to mention as well, there's a really good, if anyone was listening and wants to learn more from a kind of expert, there's a podcast called Glow West. It's like, I think it's the biggest sexuality podcast in Ireland. And Dr. Caroline West interviews Joe Devine, Samantha is actually her name, but she's the co-owner of joedevine.co.uk. And she goes into all the different actual materials and ingredients you need to look out for. I can only remember a few of them, so I don't want to go into
no worries.
But yeah, she's just she was pointing out just like the amount of infections you can get from stuff like that bacteria can be really, easily kind of spread from the use of some of them, and different toxins, and it's just really informative, so probably good to.
And what was the podcast again called?
So it's Glow West.
Glow West. Okay. I'll put that in the description below, everyone. So definitely check that out as well. Yeah. Now, do you ever recommend, so I know you're saying that you work sometimes on relationships, for example. So if a couple came in and was looking to maybe try something new, are sex toys something that you would recommend to people like that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'd recommend being open-minded to it.
Right.
I think sometimes, again, because of this kind of the media portrayal of sex toys, unfortunately, that sometimes people feel a bit like they're failing in some way if they need to introduce a sex toy, which is so untrue. I mean, I'm always like, what a time to be alive. You know, we can buy these things that literally make sex, you know, can make sex so much more pleasurable for people. So why not take advantage of that, you know? Like, our body parts can't really vibrate and do all this stuff that some sex toys just can, and that's okay. And that it's not about being in competition, you know, with a sex toy or anything like that. So I'd probably talk a little bit about that first, and just, you know, break down some myths around sex toys. But yeah, absolutely. I'm actually working at the moment on, it's kind of like a sex checklist, for want of a better word. And it's not a to-do list. It's basically loads of different sexual activities, and a lot of them involve toys, where you and your partner, or, you know, you can do it on your own, but say if you're in a couple, you could look at them and kind of say, okay, no, that one's definitely a no. I'm never going to do that. Let's just cross off the list. Then highlight the ones that are like, I'd be willing to try that. And then some of them being like, yeah, I've always wanted to do that. So you're going to land then on some stuff, hopefully, that you've both maybe wanted to do, or maybe that one person really wants to do, and one person is like, yeah, okay, I'm open to trying it. So I think that can be a really fun tool as well to use, just to open, you know, broaden your horizons a little bit. Because it can be overwhelming, you know, if you Google how to spice up your sex life or sex tips, I mean, you're going to get like millions of hits. And there's so much stuff out there, and it's overwhelming, and it's this position, that position, and, you know, it doesn't need to be that overwhelming or that complicated.
And like you said before, I'm sure like a lot of people may feel like, oh, they're failing, or that they need to do this and that, when in reality, it's no, you're just spicing something up. You're trying something new. Like you said before, you're getting something that you may not get from a partner. So it's interesting there how people kind of, it's almost portrayed as, like you're failing, like you were saying before, instead of it benefiting.
Exactly.
Now I want to get into relationships, because I really like how you brought that up before. But when somebody is coming to you and they're asking for, let's say, dating advice, or they're asking for where to find someone, what is some advice that you can give these people?
I suppose at the moment it's been really difficult because it's not the best time for me to be starting a business where I'm giving dating advice, you know, where people can barely date. Well, I suppose we can kind of start again now, and I know people are. Like, I suppose with the where to meet people, it is really about figuring out what's best for you. And I know that's probably sounds very vague, but there's really no way around that. You know, in Ireland, okay, we have a culture of alcohol use, probably alcohol misuse a lot of the time. And generally speaking, and you can ask any Irish person this, most people, if you talk to them, have either met their partner either on an app or in the pub, like on a night out, right? Now, I'm sure there are exceptions, of course there are, but generally speaking, because again, there is such discomfort around sexuality in Ireland, that I think people have struggled to actually, you know, approach people and kind of, like, it was so funny because in when you go to the States, like, people could ask you out like at the gym, like, or at the cafe, and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, it's in, I just so taken aback. I'm just like, oh my God, you're so confident. Whereas it really, generally speaking, Irish people say it's not really like that here. With dating as well, it is kind of about, like, a huge thing about dating, and that I would kind of work on with people, is coping with rejection. And I know that sounds kind of like, you know, maybe a bit negative, as if teaching someone how to drive, you teach them how not to crash or how to deal with a crash. But this is reality, because when you're in the dating field, you are going to get rejected, and you are going to probably reject people. And even the word reject can be a harsh term, but you know, just to simplify it. So a lot of it would be actually working on that, even before I talk about where to meet people, and kind of, you know, what have your experiences been so far, and what has
Right.
worked and what hasn't worked, and how do you cope with this and that, and it's going to be very, unique to each person.
Right.
And I guess then it would really be about how do you, it's kind of what you're looking for. If someone's looking for casual sex, kind of dating, yeah, a lot of that's going to happen online.
Yeah.
It's probably, not that I know of yet, but there's no big kind of convention or whatever
No,
that you can
yeah.
go to just meet people for casual sex. Not yet in
Not yet.
Ireland
No.
anyway. I don't think so. Maybe I should start one. But yeah, a lot of that's going to happen online. And then I would talk about kind of, self-care online, protecting yourself, connecting with people online. What are some red flags? And I'm very much, I do give advice. It's not that I do nothing, but I
Right.
do like to kind of draw it out of the person as well,
Yeah.
because it is it is their learning and it is their journey, and it's going to differ. Because even something I could find as a red flag, they could be like, oh no, I'd be fine with that. So I don't want to tell them
Yeah.
basically
Yeah.
stuff too much, rather work it out with them. And then if it's someone looking for a more, people that are looking for love, as they say,
Yeah.
a lot of the time on these kind of image-based apps like Tinder and stuff, I mean, it can absolutely work, but you're going to have to sort through a lot of people that aren't necessarily looking for that,
lot of people. Yeah.
yeah. So you're trying to find someone you've common interest with or some common ground with.
Yeah.
So I kind of go through what they enjoy to do, what would be their interests, things like that, and then think, okay, how can we find people? Is it through like different clubs or societies or different events?
Right.
And then sometimes it could just be actually not about how to meet people, but how to actually date them. So how
Right.
to act on a date, or how to communicate, with the other person, things like that. And again, it's just so varied, but that's kind of a snapshot of things that would come up, basically.
Awesome.
A lot of stuff, just while I remember, a lot of stuff on, I think are they called situationships? I'm not sure. Is that a new term I came across?
Yeah, I've never heard of that.
I could be using it wrong, actually, but what I'm trying to get at anyway is, do you know when people are dating but they're not boyfriend and girlfriend? Yes, they're not official, and there's this whole. I could be actually using that term wrong, but you know what I'm talking about anyway.
Yes.
That kind of, that kind of, I was about to call it no man's land, which is awful because it's not. It's totally not. But people can feel like a bit in limbo if they feel they want to move on with the relationship, or if they're unsure.
Yeah.
So that comes up a lot. Say, how do I have that talk where, I want to be with this person, but I'm not sure do they want to be with me. And, people can play a lot of games. We play a lot of games sometimes when we're dating. So that would come up a lot, and kind of me checking with that person. Well, how do you feel? What would you like to, how would you like to feel after communicating with this person? What would you like to get across to them? What might they respond with, and how can we cope with the different responses? And so things like that.
Okay, cool. Now with relationships, you were saying that you work a lot with people who are worried about infidelity and cheating and things like that. How do you deal with that? How do you get people to essentially trust? Like if people are super, I guess, untrustful, or people are worried that their partner's cheating or this and that, what are some advices that you often give people in those situations?
Yeah, I mean, it's really really tricky.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of kind of beliefs we can come across, like, once a cheater, always a cheater. But that's something anyway I've heard being said a lot. And of course, anything like this, it can't really be separated into black and white. Even though, like, I follow, just out of interest, I follow a lot of, these relationship advice pages on Instagram.
Yeah.
And some of them I'm like, oh my God, like, these are so polarizing. Do you know the stuff they put out? I'm like, they're so black and white. But anyway, I guess like the first thing would be, again, you're checking with the person, how are they feeling? How are they, say, you know, if someone has actually been unfaithful or cheated on them in some way, then you would kind of, suppose you need to analyze as well your partner's behavior. So there is a big difference. So say I had someone come to me and he had been, so it was a woman that came to me in a relationship with a man, and he had been unfaithful with his, I think it was his ex-wife.
Okay.
And she had suspicions, just about stuff found on the computer that he was being unfaithful to her.
Right.
And I was, you know, I was kind of like, okay, you know, the fact that he was unfaithful with his ex-wife, like, how would you process that? Okay, so people are allowed to make mistakes, they're allowed to grow, and they're allowed to move on. But at the same time, he had lied to her about other things in the relationship, the current girlfriend. So I was like, okay, there's definitely a comfort with lying here, and there's a bit of a pattern. And, you know, basically this all stemmed from you finding something, so you kind of initiated this. Like, comparing, say, that to maybe a couple who've been together and someone gets, I don't know, someone gets really drunk, makes a really stupid mistake, comes and tells their partner straight away. I'm not condoning it. I'm not saying that's okay. And it is totally up to that person whether they are like, no, you know, that's it. But you can see the difference between, you know,
Someone
and this
who's
kind of one
hiding
cheater,
it.
always a cheater. It's, and again, I'm not condoning it, because I do genuinely think it is such a hurtful and can be actually very traumatic for people to happen to. But sometimes it can happen from a place of many things, of desperation, of loneliness, of all different reasons. So I would kind of look at, just, you know, aside from the incident of, say, cheating or whatever has come up, all the other kind of aspects of the relationship, I guess. And I'm really careful with the advice in this one. I'm never gonna tell someone, you know, you need to leave this person, or no, you can forgive this person. I mean, that's absolutely not my place to say at all. And I would work a good bit with setting boundaries. So what is cheating? That could differ hugely between couples. Some people think watching porn is considered cheating. Some people I've heard, this is on the radio a while back, I think it kind of went a bit viral in Ireland. Some people think using a vibrator is cheating.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, whereas some people have, but even people who have open relationships and are in polyamorous relationships, you know, they can still, there's this myth that they can't be cheated on. Of course they can, because it's about honesty and transparency, if that's what they decide. I know some people decide that, okay, what you do with this person or these days, I don't want to know. Whereas other couples be like, no, full disclosure. So anything outside of that, you know, would be considered unfaithful. So it is really figuring out, having those chats. They're hard chats to have, and they don't necessarily come up easily. You're out for dinner, you're like, so what do you consider cheating, just before we move on? But there's definitely room for it if you are becoming a couple, and if you are making it official. I'm saying that in little quotation marks. You know, that could be the time to kind of open that up a bit, because you're already talking about, if you're making it official, you're probably also kind of agreeing you're not going to see other people. You know, that kind of generally comes as part of that kind of movement from dating into a relationship. So it's a good time to have a chat about it, or even just bring it up. You know, if you're watching TV or a film, or there's some agony and column or whatever, like talk about it. Just like, what do you think about this? And I just think it's really, I know, sorry, it's a bit off topic to what you asked me, but I think it's really important that, like, all this groundwork is kind of laid down a little bit before really getting, I suppose, into a committed serious relationship, maybe.
And it helps the surprise factor too, I would assume. So, like, if you talk about it, and then let's say someone has cheated, and then they're so surprised that that partner's left them, for example, or stays or whatnot. If you haven't talked about that, or if you have talked about it, then there's nothing to be surprised about. You know, setting those ground rules, I think, can really help, even help with cheating. You know, if people don't know what's going on in the relationship, then I'm sure that'll definitely maybe potentially ruin things down the road, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, you're right. Definitely, just as you said, ground rules, kind of setting them, and like they can change, and
Yeah,
that's the thing,
exactly.
they can
Yeah.
change. And it is, you know, sometimes these things, as with sex as well. I'm always saying, talk about it, talk about it, talk about it.
Yeah.
But like, I totally appreciate that talking about this with the person you're actually in a relationship with or having sex with is hard. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's, but that's kind of, it is worth doing, even
Yeah.
if it is difficult.
Yeah.
Definitely.
All right. Awesome. Now, Grace, where can people find you? I know you said you have Instagram and you have a website coming. Do you mind plugging those in?
No problem. So I can't wait till my website is up and running, but it's not yet. It will
Okay.
be, it'll be gracealice.com. I
Okay.
imagine I have bought a few different domains, so it'll
Right.
be one of them, but
Yeah.
I'll update you. But for now, basically my Instagram is kind of the main point of reference. So it's
Cool.
Grace Alice Sex Educator, and there's an underscore between each word. So there's
Okay.
3 underscores. So Grace
Awesome.
Alice, there's 4 separate words. And on my Instagram, if you click into my link in bio, you can go onto my LinkedIn. There's all my qualifications, my training, everything there. And my email address is included as well. I definitely have it on my Instagram and my PayPal, etc. So it's all there for
Awesome.
now, but
Cool.
the website hopefully will be up soon.
Yeah, and that will be in the description below, everyone. So definitely check all of that out. But I thank you so much, Grace, for being on the podcast today, for chatting. It was definitely I learned a lot today, and I'm sure everybody else out there did as well. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This was officially my first podcast
Oh,
or being a
awesome.
guest on a podcast. So I was kind of nervous, and I definitely chatter on when I'm nervous. But anyway, that's for you to be editing and
That's
dealing
good.
with.
That's good. I like
But
it when people talk more versus like a couple sentences and then it's like, oh shoot, now
oh God,
we need
yeah.
to speed it up. Yeah. No, that's awesome. But
Yeah.
yeah, thank you. All right, everyone. That is it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I did a lot. I learned so much, and this episode actually got me thinking a lot differently about various things. So, about sex toys, for example, about cheating, about dating. I learned so much here, and I hope you took something away. I thought this was a super interesting episode, and I think Grace did such an amazing job explaining everything. Be sure to check out all of Grace's links below. You can check out her Instagram below. You can check out all of the things from her Instagram. So she kind of has like a link in her bio where you can check out all of her links. You can also check out all of the websites that she mentioned throughout this episode. So the sex shops and the podcast, I will post all of those in the description below as well. So thank you all for listening to this week's episode, and I will talk to you all next week.